need to speak for a second time to identify an issue that has not already been raised for or receive clarification, they may come up an additional time to the podium. The first planning meeting tonight concerns a proposed amendment to the town's zoning bylaw, number 080-13, in accordance with Section 34 of the Planning Act. The property is municipally known as 1988 7th Line in the town of Innisfil. We'll now hear from the clerk on how the public notice of this meeting was provided.
Your Worship, notice of this public meeting was circulated to all agencies, stakeholders, and to all landowners within 120 meters of the subject lands. Notice was also posted in the Innisfil Journal and on the town's website.
Thank you very much, Mr. Jacob. Has any correspondence been received by the Clerk's Department concerning the proposed amendments?
Your Worship, no correspondence has been received.
Thank you. We will now hear from Mr. Chris Cannon, placemaker planner, who will provide a summary of the planning context of the application. And Mr. Cannon's been with us only a few weeks, and this is his first presentation in front of us. So welcome to the town of Innisfil, and we'll try not to be too hard on you tonight.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Good evening, Madam Mayor, members of council, staff, and members of the public. My name is Chris Cannon. I'm a placemaker planner with the town. Thank you. The subject lands are located on the north side of 7th Line east of Young Street. This plan in front of you shows the location of the lands in the southeast corner where the proposed lots, which are subject to the rezoning application, those lots are proposed to be rezoned residential rural exception. The purpose of the application is to facilitate the permission for the creation of 2 rural residential dwelling lots with specific performance standards on the southeastern portion of the property. Additionally, the reduction of the lot area minimum requirement to 15 hectares will be placed on the remainder of the ag general land. We also intend to rezone the woodlot in the north, actually it says northeast, it should be the northwest quadrant environmental protection. The lands subject to the proposed residential rural exception zoning are within the rural area designation in the town's Our Place official plan. That designation permits the proposed rezoning of the lands to facilitate the creation of the 2 lots. The studies that were submitted to support the application are the planning justification report, a hydrogeological assessment, and an environmental impact study. Staff have reviewed the application with regard to planning policies, the provincial policy statement, the provincial growth plan, the Lake Simcoe protection plan, the County of Simcoe official plan, and the Town of Innisfil official plan. It says no comments in my presentation, but I received a call late this afternoon from a resident, Jeff Wagamuth, at 1871 7th Line. He was on the circulation list. He was just inquiring about the processing of the application and what the next steps are. I pointed him to our website to obtain some information on the application, or informed him that he could come into the office during business hours to obtain additional information. The proposed application is consistent with the provincial policy statement. The application, as presented, complies with the growth plan, the Lake Simcoe protection plan, the County of Simcoe official plan, and the Town of Innisfil Our Place official plan. The next steps in the application is that staff will bring back the zoning bylaw amendment for a decision once all issues and concerns are addressed. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Cannon. We'll now hear from Tyler Hughes, planner from Bose Fields Incorporated, representing the applicant, who will provide further details on the application.
Okay, perfect. Good evening, everyone. My name is Tyler Hughes. I'm with Bousfields, the planning consultant for this application. I'm not going to add much more. I just want to thank staff for working with us throughout this process to get us to this point. And I'm here to answer any questions that may arise for this application.
Thank you very much, Mr. Hughes. That's what we like, leaving all the time for the residents and not the consultants. We'll now hear from those who have questions regarding the proposed applications. We'll hear first from the public and then from council. I would ask that each person addressing council please come forward and use the microphone. Please come forward and state your name for the record. So, is there anyone here who would like to make a comment or ask a question regarding this proposed? And I'll ask again on this application, is there anyone here who has any comment to make? Seeing none, members of council, any questions or comments on this application? Councillor Ices?
Thank you, Your Worship. I kind of confused looking at this application, and maybe I'll start by asking if you know the history of the house that is right on the corner there that appears to be severed off. My knowledge of property like this used to be the landowner could have a retirement lot which would be severed off, and it appears that that's what that is, and usually that would nullify any further severances to the property. So that's my knowledge of it. I'm just curious about the history of that.
I'm not sure about the history of that property that's already severed off.
Can you speak to, though, why the Planning Act would allow that?
Well, under the, our application is compliant with both the County of Simcoe and the Town of Innisfil official plans in terms of strip development. So we originally proposed 3 lots, but now because there's an existing lot there, the maximum number of lots you can have in a row is 3. So now this is the condition we have now, where we're proposing 2 lots. And they're rural zoning, they're not agricultural.
Go ahead, Councillor.
Unfortunately, I didn't get a chance to drive by there. If memory serves me correct, those lots are currently being farmed. Is that correct?
That is my understanding. That's agricultural use.
But it's rural. Rurally zoned, or is it zoned agricultural?
I believe it's designated rural. Designated rural.
Mr. Cannon?
The property is designated rural in the town's official plan, which permits this type of development. What Mr. Hughes was speaking about is the strip development that's referred to in the County of Simcoe's official plan. They do not allow 3 entrances or 3 access points within 200 meters of each other, so that these 3 lots, they don't allow more than 3. So these 3 lots are permitted in the county's official plan as well as our official plan.
The slide before this showed it AG zoned. Did I see that properly?
It's zoned agricultural general, but it's designated in the town's official plan as rural area.
I guess that's where my confusion is, because as a farmer, all farmers are very aware in Innisfil and any agriculture area that it's very poor planning to just knock some lots off a farm property, and it's, to my knowledge, not generally allowed, because you can see the sprawl that it creates, and I'm not sure why Innisfil would allow this. From visually, it doesn't look like it's very good planning, in my opinion, so far.
Sorry, my name is Mike Bissett. I'm a planner with Bousfields. And I hear what you're saying, and I think the same thing obviously came up when I saw it too, as an application. That's why the rural designation in the official plan, as distinct from an agricultural designation, makes it different. I'm sure you have a lot of people thinking about doing this similar thing in the area, even along this street perhaps, but if they're in an agricultural designation, they can't do that. This is a rural designation under the official plan. And so if it's in a rural designation, the official plan at the Simcoe OP level allows for no more than 3. We proposed 3 lots beside the existing lot. They said, no, 3 including the existing lot, right? On the original farm parcel, right? So you cannot have more than that. And so that's the distinction between this parcel and most of the lots you're going to find probably in Innisfil are going to be in agricultural designated lands in areas which are farmed. This is a bit of a more of a unique circumstance. Just to hopefully that clarifies things a little bit.
Mr. Kane?
Just to add to that, through your worship, to Councillor Icy. So the soil classification mapping for this site has those soils at a lower class than our prime agriculture areas. So those soil classes at a higher level are showing these soil classes as class 5 to 7. So that was probably part of the reason it was in a rural designation rather than a prime agricultural one. And the second reason it may be in that rural designation as well is that the land is pinched off by the natural heritage features around it. So it's not as contiguous with other prime agricultural areas as what better quality agricultural lands might be.
Go ahead, Mr. Rice, or Councillor Ices.
So because on the map, it just shows agricultural general, is the whole property zoned rural?
That's the zoning. That's the zoning. The designation under the official plan is rural, the whole property.
The whole property is
Yes.
designated rural.
Now, except for a component in the northwest corner, as you can see at the very top, where it says lot 17 up there, the designation is environmental protection or natural heritage. And through this application, notwithstanding that the zoning is agricultural, we're rezoning that to environmental protection to ensure that those lands are appropriately zoned in conformity with the official plan. However, the zoning of this property will remain agricultural, except for the environmental protection that we're putting in at the northwest corner, and then the 2 new lots will be a residential zone, right? Now, a designation under the official plan is rural and environmental protection. That will remain. There's no official plan amendment required. The issue is the distinction between the zoning and the official plan, and that's what staff has obviously been looking at very closely. So.
Councillor?
Yeah, so I am, obviously I'm not a planner, and those designations, I can understand rural when it doesn't have an agricultural use to it, but this property does in its use currently. On the paper it says it's rural, but in practice it's agricultural. So it would be difficult for a resident to drive around and be able to pick out, well, this is rural and this is agricultural. To me, it's farmland. So by us considering to approve this, whether on paper we're not taking farmland, in practice we are. That, in my opinion.
And that's fair. I mean, you couldn't necessarily distinguish the two if you're driving by it.
No.
That's fair. And that's why I think, Mr. Kane rightly referenced the reasons why, in terms of soil classifications and things of that nature. I mean, but I'm not here to debate it.
If we're arguing zoning on that, I would argue that it's improperly zoned, and I can't speak to soil maps because we run into them on the farm all the time, and the accuracy of them is very questionable because they're 50-year-old soil maps, and things do change over time. So anyway, that will be my comments on that.
Thank you, Councillor. Other comments or questions? Councillor Payne.
Thank you, Your Worship. Just a question on the house on the corner again. Is that house, is someone living in that home right now?
Yes, people.
And that home belongs to that property?
That home next door is
Yes.
not part of this property.
Okay.
This is a severing, so that, you can see it on the right-hand side there. That's an existing home on its own separate lot.
Okay. So,
This is a
and so,
separate
and
parcel,
someone is
yeah.
in that home right now?
Yes, yes.
Okay, so I was under the impression by looking at this, that this was sort of a family farm and they wanted to build 2 homes for their families. So that's not the case.
No, the owner of this parcel now is
Right.
creating these 2 homes, and it will be for their family. The one additional home, which is existing, which is not part of this property,
Okay,
has nothing to do with this family who owns
Okay.
the greater parcel.
okay. So if there's
understand.
agriculture, then I'm saying, I'm sort of
Right.
hoping then that the family will continue to do the farming. That's hopeful.
If that's their
Right.
prerogative to continue.
Okay, okay. Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Any comments or questions from council? Seeing none, if you have not made oral or written submissions in regard to this proposal before a decision is reached, you should be aware that the local planning appeal tribunal may dismiss your appeal. Anyone who wishes to be contacted before this application is further considered by council, please fill out the notification form located by the entrance to the council chambers. And council thanks everyone for their participation, and council will now consider the recommendation to receive the report as item 4.2. Councillor Payne. Oh, I thought you were... No. Okay. I thought you had your hand up. Okay, next is item number, planning meeting number, or you want to go to 4.2 now? Okay, so 4.2 is recommending that it be received as information. Can I have a mover and a seconder? Sorry, Councillor Payne, now I get it. Councillor Waters, all those in favor? That's carried. The next public planning meeting is regarding 1303 Bel Air Beach Road, Cortel Group subdivision. Actually, the next 2 are right beside each other, and I think have the same planning consultant working for them. So this one is proposed draft plan of subdivision and proposed amendment to the town's official plan and comprehensive zoning bylaw under the Planning Act. The property is municipally known as 1303 Bel Air Beach Road in the town of Innisfil. We'll now hear from the clerk on how the public notice of this meeting was provided.
Notice of this public meeting was posted on the property and circulated to all agencies and to all landowners within 120 meters of the area affected on August 8th, 2019. Notice was also posted in the Innisfil Journal and on the town's website.
Thank you, Mr. Jacob. Has any correspondence been received by the clerk's department concerning the proposed amendments?
Your Worship, 3 pieces of correspondence have been received. The first one from the County of Simcoe dated September 16th, 2019, providing comments on the application. The second one from Dr. Carolyn Allen dated September 12th, 2019, expressing concerns regarding train horns and the impact on homeowners. And a second piece of correspondence from Dr. Allen dated September 12th, 2019, again providing further comments on the impact of train horns.
Thank you, Mr. Jacob. We'll now hear from Mr. Stephen Montgomery, Senior Planner, who will provide a summary of the planning context of the application. Whenever you're ready, Mr. Montgomery.
Thank you, Mayor, members of council, staff, and the public. The purpose of this public meeting is to consider a plan of subdivision, zoning bylaw amendment, and official plan amendment application for the subject lands which are located at 1303 Bel Air Beach Road in Lefroy. These applications have been submitted by the applicant to permit a proposed 153-unit residential subdivision on the subject lands. The 2018 aerial photo above shows the location of the subject lands, which are located inside of the settlement area boundary of Lefroy, south of Bel Air Beach Road, and west of the Metrolinx rail line. They are currently vacant and approximately 5.3 hectares in area, with about 184 meters of frontage on the south side of Bel Air Beach Road. To the north of the subject lands is Bel Air Beach Road, of course, and agricultural lands. To the west of the subject lands are single detached homes and townhouses in the Elsemi P1 Lormel subdivision, as well as lands proposed for a townhouse development at 1357, which is here, Bel Air Beach Road. To the south of the subject lands are single detached dwellings and townhouses, again in the Lormel Elsemi P1 subdivision. To the east of the subject lands are the Metrolinx rail line, significant woodlands here, and provincially significant wetland, as well as existing single attached dwellings. So the applicant is proposing a 153-unit residential subdivision on the subject lands, which would include 130 condominium townhouses and 7 condominium live-work units on private common element road, 16 single detached dwellings on a public road, and the public road is an extension of the existing Bardo Street, common amenity areas, public parkette, and stormwater management block. Subject lands are currently designated residential low density 2. The official plan amendment proposes to redesignate the subject lands from residential low density 2 to residential medium density special section. A zoning bylaw amendment proposes to rezone the lands from agricultural general, or AG, to residential 3 exception hold R312, residential townhouse exception hold RT2728 zone, and open space zone to permit the development. The following studies were prepared by the applicant and are being peer reviewed by the town and the Conservation Authority. There's a planning justification report, a placemaking brief, a functional servicing report, which includes stormwater, a scoped hydrogeological evaluation of the groundwater, a stage 1 to 2 archaeological study, a noise and vibration study, an environmental impact study, and a traffic impact study. So this is the draft concept plan, which the applicant's planner will provide additional details on. It consists of 130 units of townhouses with 6-meter frontage on private roads, which are shown in orange. In red at the top are 7 units of live-work townhouses with commercial space on the bottom floor and residential on the 2 floors above, fronting onto Bel Air Beach Road. And at the bottom in yellow are 16 units of freehold single attached dwellings on minimum 9.4 meter frontage lots on a public road, which, as mentioned, is an extension of Bardo Street, which is a municipal road, which is shown in dark gray. And the private roads in the development are shown in lighter gray. There's a stormwater management pond shown in blue at the northwest corner of the site, a 0.21 hectare public park, a portion of which fronts onto the proposed public Bardo Street extension in the southwest portion of the development. There's a 2.5 meter high acoustical fence, which is shown along the rail line, and a walkway is also shown connecting the parkette to the proposed future development on 1357 to the northwest. A 5-meter road, municipal road widening with on-street parking and a 3.75 meter wide trail block is also shown on the top of the development adjacent Bel Air Beach Road. So I will now briefly go through the applicable planning policies. The Innisfil strategic, these are high-level policies. The Innisfil strategic plan talks about the importance for planning for growth and intensification while maintaining community character, developing active transportation and connecting trails and walkways, the optimization of infrastructure, and provision of affordable housing. The proposed development directs growth to inside of the Lefroy settlement area boundary, which would reduce sprawl and promote compact development in accordance with the provincial growth plan. Now, higher densities are generally planned adjacent to major collector and arterial roads and railway lines, which the site abuts. Active transportation would be achieved through proposed connecting trails, including an extension of the existing planned trail along Bel Air Beach Road in a 3.75 meter wide trail block. Private and public sidewalks and roads are proposed through the development, and existing sewer and water infrastructure on Bel Air Beach Road would be utilized and the townhouses and live-work units would provide more affordable housing options, and the live-work units also would provide options for local businesses. When we look at the provincial policy statement, it talks about that settlement areas shall be the focus of growth and development, and land use patterns shall be based on a mix of land uses which efficiently use land and resources and facilitate intensification in compact form, while providing a range and mix of housing types and densities to meet current and future residents. Again, the lands are inside the settlement and would assist in achieving these policies through a mix of land uses in a compact form, which more efficiently uses land and resources and facilitates intensification. The provincial policy statement also discusses fostering healthy, active communities through trails and linkages. And as mentioned, there are trails, walkways, and sidewalks, and a public parkette proposed. As well, the PPS talks about the natural environment in Section 2.1 and natural heritage. An environmental impact study has been provided and is being reviewed by the Lake Simcoe Region Conservation Authority with respect to the fact development is adjacent to or in the vicinity, I should say, of a provincially significant wetland on the other side of the tracks to the east, and the impact to develop in the wetland and related significant woodlands is required to be evaluated. When we look at the provincial growth plan, the growth plan directs development again inside settlement areas, and it states the importance of planning for complete communities with a diverse mix of land uses in a compact form, including residential employment uses, convenient access to local stores, services, and public service facilities, as well as improved social equity and overall quality of life, including human health for people of all ages, abilities, and incomes, and provision of a diverse range and mix of housing options to accommodate people in all stages of life and to accommodate the needs of household sizes and incomes. This developer proposes more affordable housing types than traditional large lot single attached dwellings, and also provides a convenient access to local stores and services through the live-work component. Development also provides active transportation. The town official plan in the appendices shows a proposed secondary trail linkage to the future GO station on the 6th line from Bel Air Beach Road, which I'll speak to in a minute, which this development would be in close proximity to. The area that the GO station on the 6th line is proposed would become the most dense area in the municipality, which is approximately 1.4 kilometers from the subject lands. So to reduce urban sprawl, the provincial growth plan, and I'll talk about this in a minute, but requires a minimum overall townwide average of 32 residents and jobs per hectare, and the latest revision in 2019 of the growth plan requires 40 residents and jobs per hectare, but this is not in effect. Other neighborhoods, such as the older neighborhoods in Lefroy, and this is discussed in the staff report, are lower density at about 15 persons and jobs per hectare, so new development is required to be higher than 32, so the townwide average is brought up in accordance with provincial policy. This density is proposed at about 79 persons and jobs per hectare, or 30 persons per net hectare. By comparison, the adjacent Lower Mel subdivision, which has more single detached homes overall on wider public streets, is about 50 persons and jobs per hectare on average, or approximately 20 units per net hectare. So staff are continuing to review the density of the development in the context of the growth plan. Two more things, the Lake Simcoe Protection Plan, just briefly, the development has to be evaluated in that context under the settlement area policies. And lastly, with respect to the County of Simcoe official plan, the county designates these lands as settlement, and it requires these lands to be planned to accommodate a diversity of land uses, residential, commercial, institutional, and other uses, in a compact form that promotes efficient use of land and provision of water, sewer, transportation, other services, and integrates paths and trails. And again, staff are continuing to review this in that context. This is the Our Place Town Official Plan land use schedule, which shows the residential low density 2 designation on the subject lands. The subject lands are outlined in white. Staff note the subject lands were originally intended as the location of the Lefroy GO station. However, the new location is on the 6th line. So again, as stated, the lands are proposed to be redesignated to residential medium density special section by the applicant. The residential low density 2 designation currently permits single detached homes, townhouses, and live-work units at a density of 13 to 25 units per net hectare, whereas the proposal on this site is about 30 units per net hectare, which is higher than the official plan permission of about 5 units per net hectare. So the applicant is therefore proposing a residential medium density, which allows a higher density range of 25 to 60 per hectare, which the proposed density of 30 would fit into. The official plan also states that neighborhoods in Section 10 shall include a range of housing densities and types to promote diversity in settlement areas and accommodate all current and future residents. To provide some context to the future GO station, the proposed development site is at the bottom of the screen, which is labeled the subject lands. In the Town Trails Master Plan, a conceptual location of a future secondary trail is shown in green on the screen, going between the 6th line and Bel Air Beach Road. Subject lands are about 1.4 kilometers from the future GO station, and the mobility orbit, which is an 800-meter radius around the station, is planned to eventually become the most dense area in the municipality. So again, subject lands are not directly adjacent to a GO station because it was moved to the 6th line, but densities are intended to increase in general as you move towards the station, in particular within that 800-meter area. So this slide is just to provide some context with respect to the mobility orbit. So a full review of site hydrogeology is required, as well as implementation of a well monitoring program, similar to what was required for the Lormel El Semi P1 subdivision, due to existing wells in the area and the impact development may have on existing groundwater, including highly vulnerable aquifers. So a full set of draft plan conditions would be required for this development, which would include that, and also include such matters as architectural control and urban design, sewer and water allocation, street naming, phasing, fencing, landscaping, tree preservation, updates to any studies, parkland dedication, and other standard matters for subdivision. Other applications that would have to come through would be a part lot control for the lot division of the individual townhouses and live-work units. Condo exemption would be required if it's condominium tenure is proposed, which is my understanding, and the development would be subject to a detailed site plan control process as well. So the lands are subject to cost sharing, specifically the Lefroy cost sharing agreement. And section 24.6 of the official plan of the town states that property owners in this Lefroy settlement area shall contribute equally to community and infrastructure facilities, such as community use lands, parks, and local infrastructure, public works, roads, sanitary water, and stormwater financing and indexing adjustments. So cost sharing for this development would therefore be a condition if it was approved as a subdivision. With respect to parkland, for something like this, we calculated at 1 hectare per 300 units under the Planning Act. And this, when you combine it with the other application this evening, 1357 Bel Air Beach Road, it's about 0.81 hectares of parkland total. Only about 0.21 hectares have been provided between the two developments. So again, staff are continuing to review the parkland requirements in the context of the surrounding area, including the Lormel subdivision adjacent, the official plan of the Parks and Recreation Master Plan. The proposed parkette does meet the size standard of a parkette, which is 0.2 hectares to 0.5 hectares, and provides parkland within a reasonable walking distance of the development. And there's also an existing 2-hectare central park located about 300 meters walking distance from the proposed development. The density and concentration of townhouses is a stated concern of residents, and staff are continuing to review the density in the context of applicable town policies. Typically, development, as I mentioned, adjacent to rail lines and major collector roads does contain higher densities in development internal to a subdivision, and staff notes that these lands were originally proposed for a GO station, which would have resulted in a mobility orbit scenario and potentially even higher densities in this area if that was the case. Which it's currently not. The subject lands are adjacent to townhouses and single-family homes to the west and south. Development should be compatible, but also provide a variety of housing options in the context of each settlement area, while providing compact development and reducing sprawl. There's also, I'll point out, it's in the staff report, the official plan in section 24.1 says that the greenfield areas of Lefroy, which are the new development areas, can have a maximum of 25% townhouses. It appears that the 1303 and 1357 Bel Air Beach Road combined may exceed this overall number for greenfield areas of 25%, somewhere between 25 and 30%. So staff are continuing to review this in the context of existing all development proposed in Lefroy's greenfield areas to see if that policy is met. Staff are also aware of council and public concerns respecting train noise and the proposing of development adjacent to rail lines. Berming and acoustical fencing is proposed along the rail line, and the development does meet the minimum 30-meter setback required in the zoning bylaw. Train horn noise, as well as noise and vibration from rail traffic in general, is a concern to staff, and the town is peer reviewing the noise and vibration study provided. Berming and acoustical fencing would be required, as well as warning clauses in offers of purchase and sale within 300 meters. Also, options for eliminating horns could be considered through rail crossing upgrades. The city of Barrie, for example, has done this in their south end. In terms of, I'm almost finished here. In terms of entrances onto Bel-Air Beach Road, only one is provided based on comments from staff, which limit the number of entrances and intersections permitted on this road. Private roads have been designed to discourage through traffic and speeding. An urban design brief has been submitted and is required to adhere to the Lefroy Urban Design Guidelines. And lastly, staff are of the opinion that any official plan amendment that's proposed should be site-specific, with specific policies of maximum density and land uses so as to limit opportunities for major changes or density increases. For example, the proposed density is about 30 units per net hectare on this site, but a blanket medium density designation could allow up to 60 unit per net hectare in low-rise apartments, and staff do not want this to happen and want to clearly articulate the development limits of whatever is proposed and the housing types that are proposed through the official plan amendment, so they're basically nailed down. Click this way. So just in terms of process, thank you. Just in terms of process, the County of Simcoe is the approval authority for official plan amendments. So if council approves these files, the official plan amendment, the zoning bylaw amendment, the plan of subdivision at a future council meeting, the County of Simcoe is actually required to then approve the official plan amendment before the zoning and the draft plan of subdivision are to take effect. So it's having some difficulties again. So in terms of comments received, Hydro 1, there's some comments received from Hydro 1 stating no concerns. There's a resident letter from August 23rd states that they object to the proposed development, and this letter is attached to the staff report. Another resident stated concerns respecting train horn noise on Health and that Bel-Air Beach Road crossing should be upgraded. The County of Simcoe provided a letter dated September 16, 2019 describing the required studies and that the design does not comply with their waste collection road design policy, which would mean that waste would have to be collected privately unless the development is redesigned to their standards with larger turning radii. The Simcoe County District School Board also states in correspondence submitted this afternoon they have no objection to the application but are reviewing the need for an additional school in this general location due to accommodation pressures on nearby schools. An open house was held at the Lefroy Community Center on August 28th. Comments are summarized in the staff report. These include concerns of increased crime and social problems, overcrowding and traffic increases, concern about tax increases to pay for the development, including school taxes and school overcrowding. Statements were made the development should be in Alcona. Lefroy is too rural in character and history, and too much density is proposed for Lefroy. So in terms of next steps, staff will review and consider all comments received on this application, including peer review comments, and report back to council at a future council meeting, recommending whether this development should be approved. A notice would be provided when this recommendation report is returning to council for consideration to all those who wrote, spoke, and or signed the guest book at the public meeting and open house. And again, the County of Simcoe would have to final approve this official plan amendment if town council adopts the official plan amendment, subdivision and zoning, before they all take effect. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Montgomery. Next, we'll hear from Mr. Darren Vella, planner of Innovative Planning Solutions, representing the applicant, who will provide further details on the application. Whenever you're ready, Mr. Vella.
Thank you, Your Worship, members of council. Good evening. I'm here this evening on behalf of the Cortel Group, and based on Mr. Montgomery's presentation, I'm going to be very brief. I don't think there's a need to repeat a lot of the comments, as his presentation was very detailed. So what I'm going to do is just really focus on some of the key elements of the development. So we have the slide here which shows the development concept. And as Mr. Montgomery pointed out, there's a few different components to the development. So I'd just like to highlight those for council. So in the southern portion of the development, what is occurring is we are connecting Bordeaux Street, which is currently a cul-de-sac, sitting there with an empty block of land where there are proposed future townhomes to be constructed, and that will complete that section of Bordeaux Street in the Lormel subdivision. So Bordeaux Street is intended to proceed north and then turn to the west and will connect in with Plant Street. So we'll have better circulation at the municipal level for garbage pickup, for snow plowing, for emergency services. Cul-de-sacs these days are really frowned upon from an overall design perspective. So this connection really will help the overall connectivity of the subdivision, not only from a vehicle perspective, but also from a pedestrian perspective. There'll be municipal sidewalks on these roads, and it will just help finish off that area. So as we look further into the development, as Mr. Montgomery has pointed out, there is a proposed new municipal parkette, and that parkette is intended to serve not only this development, but also the adjacent development, and offer some different amenities in this parkette as compared to the larger parkland that is situated further to the west in the Lormel subdivision. So we think that's a nice piece to offer to the municipality that will overall just improve your overall placemaking objectives that you have in your official plan. The yellow units, or orange, depending on what color you think they are, so those are 6 meter wide, so 20-foot wide condominium townhouses. So the remaining roads within this development are private roads. So these roads will not be assumed by the municipality. They'll not be snow plowed by the municipality. The role overall for the municipality with a condominium development, your responsibilities become much less as the development is maintained and operated by a condominium corporation. And really the success of condominium corporations usually surround having an overall number of units to support the condominium. So you typically would not want to have a condominium with 30 units in it. It'd be very difficult for that condominium corporation to maintain the expenses associated with running and maintaining that property. So having a certain number of units within the condo just helps its overall sustainability. Some of the other things that I think are important for council to understand when we're talking about condominium developments is it does provide the developer with a little bit more flexibility in terms of how to accommodate issues that are probably fairly common to members of council. I'm sure you have a lot of people complaining about parking on streets and congestion on streets with vehicles, particularly where there's a lot of townhouses within a certain area, because there's very little space between driveways in townhome developments to park cars. With condominium developments, we're able to provide year-round visitor parking within the development. So you can see, don't know if there's a pointer. Yes, there is. So looking at this slide first, so you can see that we have accommodated some visitor parking spaces in this area here, as well as this area down here. So there is an excess of 30 visitor parking spaces within the condominium portion of this development that will help alleviate, I think, some of the pressures that you get typically in a municipal road townhouse development setting. So we do think that is a huge benefit to this style of project because that will in turn alleviate some of the concerns that councillors will be hearing relative to the project. The live-work units, I think, is something new for the town. Our thought in going back and forth with the municipality was based on the direction that things are headed with the orbit and the type of density that we're proposing on this project as well as the project that you're going to hear in the next presentation. The number of units here, as well as the number of units within the Lormel subdivision and what the expectation is for future development, really creates a unique opportunity to provide more opportunities for people to live and work within the same general area. So what we have here is some artistic renderings of what we anticipate Bel Air Beach Road to look like should this application be approved. So what you can see is the interface between the buildings and street becomes a lot more animated. There's street level opportunities for businesses. There's also opportunities for those businesses, the owners of those businesses, to live above their units, or those units can be rented out and help alleviate some of the rental issues, not in the affordable housing sense, but affordable rental opportunities compared to people trying to purchase townhouse units. So that we feel is a really unique opportunity that we think almost sets the stage for the town looking at some of your other major roads and using this design overall throughout your other settlement areas, mainly Alcona. In front of the live-work units, there is also a trail system. It's very difficult to see on the slide, but there is a section here along Bel Air Beach Road, which we are dedicating to the municipality as part of your overall trail network. So once again, promoting other forms of pedestrian movement other than in your vehicle. So that will be incorporated into your overall trails master plan and will fit in quite nicely with the direction the town is heading relative to providing more active types of transportation. The lots that back on to the rail line, so the lots on the east side of the development, the thick black line you see here, that represents a 30-meter setback requirement that Metrolinx requires from all development to the rail line. So these homes, similar to the townhomes to the south in the Lormel subdivision, have a very large backyard and are required to satisfy the requirements from Metrolinx. So overall, this is a more dense project than I think the municipality has typically seen in the past, but in order to achieve the density requirements that are coming forward in all of the planning legislation, really the best way to achieve this in this type of location is to go with a condominium format style of development, which keeps the density at a lower scale. So we're not talking buildings in excess of 3 stories. So it achieves that objective, which also respects the character of the neighborhood in the existing subdivision to the east. Sorry, to the west. So here is another shot. So this is a shot of what the streetscape would look like within the internal condominium area. So you can see that each unit will possess 1 parking space on the driveway, as well as the ability to either have 1 or 2 parking spaces within the garage. Because these units are 3 stories in height, there is an opportunity to provide tandem dual car garage parking within the actual townhouse itself, because the majority of the living space for a 3-story townhouse occurs on the 2nd and 3rd level of the unit. So an interesting concept, and I'm sure for a lot of people interested in looking at this style of development, that may be an attractive feature for them to consider. And then finally, we have a visual rendering of what the development will look like as Bardot turns to the west and converts into Plant Street. So this is a shot of the new municipal parquet area overlooking the townhomes that would be located on the private condominium roads. So with that, Your Worship, I'm not going to get into a lot of the other planning details as Mr. Montgomery has done that. I'm here to answer any questions that council or the public may have. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Vella. And just before we go into questions and comments from the public, I just wanted to clarify with clerks. So we, in our package, have two pieces of correspondence. The letter from Hydro One and the letter from H. Hudson, but the other three pieces of correspondence we do not have. Will that be circulated to council? Okay.
Your Worship, those three pieces of correspondence will also be attached to the agenda package tomorrow.
Thank you. Thanks for that. So we'll now hear from those who have questions regarding the proposed application. We will hear first from the public and then from council, and I would ask each person addressing council, please come forward and use the microphone, and if you could state your name for the record. So, members of the public who have question, want clarification, want to provide comment, please come forward. Thank you and welcome.
Hi, my name is Cheryl Bruce. I live at 1297 Bardo Street with my husband, and we've lived there for 3 years. We enjoy being at the end of our road being a cul-de-sac. We do know that when we bought the property, at some point it would become an open road, but our objection is the amount of units being built there. I think it far exceeds the density numbers, and I'm afraid of the traffic that's going to be going. Right now, we have a cul-de-sac. We don't have traffic going up and down. And I don't feel the need to be able to go that way. I'm just as fine going the other way. When you posted your signs, they're not up front where people see them when they're out walking. They're kind of hidden behind construction vehicles. And a lot of the people in our neighborhood are close to that proximity, didn't even get the letters that we got. So they weren't even aware of it. I've tried to go out canvassing to the neighbors, but a lot of them are renters, so I don't see why there's a problem with trying to find renters. And I'm just basically opposed to this because of the amount of people, these townhouses being built in that short area. If you see the drawing, which is not up there now, you have one entrance coming in off of Bel Air Road, and the other two entrances are coming in from our neighborhood, Bardo Street and Plant Street. It's just going to be a traffic jam. And they're going to go from a municipal side, width of a road down to a laneway, basically. So how are you going to get the fire trucks through there? I'm just totally opposed to this. And I was at that first meeting, the public meeting, and I did have the opportunity to speak at length to Mr. Montgomery. And so I hope that my comments were part of the general comments that were up there. So, thank you.
Thank you very much. Other comments, questions of clarification? Ms. Crawford?
Thank you. Deb Crawford, 36 McNaughton Drive. A little bit down the road in Guildford, sunny downtown Guildford. But we drive past this area all the time. And the traffic on the 20th Side Road is becoming more and more and more all the time. The set of lights that have been installed exiting from the Lormel subdivision breaks it up. I suppose that's a good thing. You have the intersection on Belliere Beach Road and 20th Side Road, which is right where the fire trucks are. It's controlled by 2 stop signs. It really does need, to me, I'm just a layperson, right? It really would have made so much more sense to put a set of lights there and have maybe a right turn only coming out of the Lormel Gate subdivision or some such thing instead of trying to break up the traffic that much more. And I know that it's important that people watch their speed, and 20th Side Road is no longer the racetrack that it used to be. But still, no, it's about moving traffic and having people have access and access being able to come in and out of their their property. Where I also would be concerned of where the, I guess, the south end of the subdivision would exit into that property and where those would go and how that would impact on the property values of those properties. Parking, it's great that there's 30 visitor, but I know in a lot of cases it's very, very hard to manage and by two people working to pay a mortgage. And how do you always deal with two vehicles and the back and forth and the snow, and it just goes on and on. Anyway, my big concern would be noise reduction. We always have complaints from individuals who buy a property, and there's the GO train, and yes, they see the tracks, but you know what? They're not quite used to getting up at 5 o'clock in the morning when it still toots through there, or at 9 or 10 o'clock at night when they're trying to hit the sack because they've got a long commute in the morning. So I would hope that whatever's planned for that noise reduction, that it is probably state-of-the-art, and I would really actually like to challenge the developer to actually meet and fully exceed any kind of noise reduction that could possibly happen. I mean, we are looking at being serviced more and more by rail in this area. It is going through residential areas. It's an opportunity, I think, for perhaps this developer to, again, put Innisfil on the map with something new and improved and unique, perhaps. And I guess finally, I've been to a number of council meetings in the past and planning meetings, and I've heard a number of complaints of individuals who have actually purchased properties in a new subdivision, and the parkland is the last thing to go in. And oftentimes, the parkland is what is used as a selling feature for the developers for selling their properties. And they wait, and they wait, and they wait, and then they have a reduced parkland because guess what? The developer can then pay for money instead of doing parkland and throw a couple of more townhouses in there or some such thing. So I would really like to see within the planning and the whole site control that the parkland and the multi-use land is first built before houses are sold and people move in. I think it makes sense that people actually get some of the things that they are enticed to move into a subdivision when they move into it, not 10 years later. So those are my comments. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Ms. Crawford. Is there any other comments or points of clarification? Thank you, sir. If you state your name for the record, thank you.
Luke Anselli. My question and concern, I guess, is at this point, Bordeaux is not part of the town. It's not taken care of, or it's taken care of, but it's not part of the town, as far as I understand. And you're looking at those new subdivision proposal with the smaller laneways, which in a condominium, again, from my understanding, would be fire exits. So there'd be no parking on it in the summer. During the months that we're allowed to park on our street on Bordeaux, other than through the winter months, how are we going to be assured that the parking from the condominiums with 30 visitor parking with 130 townhomes, which is approximately 260 to 270 vehicles, how are we going to be assured that we're not going to be overflowed with parking onto our street when they do take it and the town does assume the road? It just does not make sense. I just don't understand it. And again, the same thing. There's only one exit and entrance from Bel Air. The other issue that I have with that one photo rendering on Bel Air Road showed parking on Bel Air. Is there plans for the town to expand Bel Air Road so that it'll accommodate that? Because from what I can see right now, if you've got parking on the side of the street there, it doesn't appear that there's enough room for traffic flow. So I'm just not sure that all that makes any sense.
Thank you. Mr. Vella, did you want to address that last comment regarding the parking on Bel Air?
Thank you, Worship. Yes, so in discussions with the town, we're currently looking at providing some lay-by parking along Bel Air Beach Road. It would be coming off of our property, but the intention of having that parking there is to provide better access to the commercial units that are fronting Bel Air Beach Road. So in order to really have those units become successful, typically you would like to have parking as close to those commercial units as possible. So we are in discussions with the town about whether there is an opportunity to provide that lay-by parking to help service those live-work units.
Thank you. Any other comments or questions? Yeah, you can come again. And I remind those that are here that there's another public planning meeting after this one, which is property adjacent to this property. So, you know,
So the same comments will apply to that. My question to the developer, so just so you understand, our address, we back up to the Metro Trail line. And when we purchased our property, we have a 60-foot deep backyard. It's bigger than your single-family homes. We love it. However, we know that there is 10 feet, I believe, behind the noise deafening sound. Let me tell you, I hear the trains in the morning and up till 10:30 at night on the weekend. So there is no noise reduction at all with your special fences. And my house kind of shakes. So when we bought our house, there's an easement that when they go to put a second track in, we have to sell them that 10 feet that's behind our noise barrier fence down to the track. Does this new development also allow for that with your deep lots? That's my question. We have to do it. Will this drawing and your plans allow for that?
Mr. Bella or staff, whichever.
Thank you, Your Worship. We may tag team this one. I think, so the backyards of the townhouse units are 30 meters deep, so they're 100 feet. So that would be 40 feet greater than the member of the public that just spoke. In terms of dedication of land to Metrolinx, I think I would defer to Mr. Montgomery on that one. I haven't really seen Metrolinx comments on this file to date.
Mr. Kane?
Yes, through your worship to the public inquiry. The land ownership question, those lands would probably remain, the town would probably take ownership of those lands closest to the rail line. As you may be aware, in more recent developments, and in particular the Sleeping Lion development, those noise barriers and that higher standard that we're doing now are considered to be a community asset that need to be taken care of on a collective basis. So if that is a community asset along along the top of that berm along there, then I would be suggesting that we would retain ownership of the lands to the east of that wall in order to be able to maintain that in perpetuity.
Thank you, Mr. Kane. Any other questions, clarification, or comments from the public? Seeing none, questions or clarifications from members of council. Councillor Payne?
Thank you, Your Worship. My concern on this development is the schooling. You're going to probably have maybe 200 kids going to school. Where are they going to go to school, and what availability is there for the schooling? Are you going to do a school close by, or is there going to be a school close by, or are you going to have to rely on what we have right now, and most of them are already overcrowded? So that's my concern mostly right now.
Mr. Kane?
Through your worship to Councillor Payne, yes, the school board is actively looking for school sites in South Elkona or in North Lefroy. So they have, I'm not sure if, sorry, I wasn't listening intently to the preamble, but the school board did make a late submission to this application. I suspect to the application that we're going to hear afterwards about as well, just indicating that they are actively looking for a school site. And I understand that as part of that, they would be in contact with the proponents of these applications to see how that might be accommodated. And if those school sites aren't part of these applications, at least they'll have a better idea of the numbers and how to accommodate that in other locations or in existing schools.
Councillor Waters?
Thank you, Your Worship. My questions pertain to the parquet that we currently have. We just had a strategic planning session where we talked about this area being higher density, and that's the way the council had perceived this area going. So this is kind of a first view of what this is going to look like, and also the type of comments we're going to get back from the public on it. However, and one of the things that our Director of Planning had suggested that the higher density proposals really require a really good look at how better parkettes and better parks. And I don't understand why we would allow the developer to go ahead with the higher densities with minimum amount of recreational space. It's going to be serving 2 communities by the looks of this. And I would highly recommend that the developer look at taking out the houses which are in that parquet and make that entire area the park. And I think it would not only would it aesthetically look really quite nice, but it would also allow all the houses on the other side to act as kind of a safety valve in terms of the kids playing in this area. You're going to have much more neighbors watching the area, making it a much safer parquet. So I think the idea of trying to increase the size of that parquet would be a huge benefit to the condominium owners who live there, and I think it would also be safer as well. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Orsatti?
Thank you, Your Worship. I have 4 areas of concern, questions, and so I will just go through those. One is looking at the growth plan. So just going over the numbers here, our current provincial plan is 32 residents per hectare. The proposed growth, which is not in effect, is 40. This is 79 per hectare. But staff, you're looking at a blanket of 60 residents per and commercial per hectare, I think was referenced in this package. Is that taking the whole Lower Mel subdivision into this? And will that will, I presume, require county approval?
Mr. Montgomery?
Through your worship, there's a couple of things going on there. One, the developer asked for a medium density residential, and the comment was staff don't want to allow the full range of density on the site. The medium density allows between 25 and 60, which is higher. There's 2 different numbers going on here. There's density based on units and density based on people, and there's about 2.5 people per unit. So that's why the numbers get confusing, because the documents have different densities, different units, the way they're measured. So the 25 to 60 is units per hectare. The 79 number was persons and jobs per hectare. So the issue was, the comparable number to the 60 is 30. So this development is actually 30 units per hectare. We would want to nail it down to a specific number, not allow the full range of 25 to 60, which is in the medium density, because it doesn't nail down the development enough and doesn't reflect what's being proposed. That was the concern.
Thank you. Just continue on here. My concerns in looking at all the planning developments is always looks at parking and parkland. So I'll start with the parking. The live-work units, I think that's quite unique, and there certainly is probably a need for that in Innisfil. The ones that are facing Bel Air Beach Road, so these are 3-story units, slab on grade, and the parking for them is in the rear, correct? But the parking, so you were looking at the lay-by parking spaces on Bel Air Beach Road, if allowed. I'm just wondering, where do your customers park? Because you can have a business, but if they can't park there, that's really going to require working with the town in either, is that a county road? No. Widening of the road to accommodate that. Do you have any comments on that one?
Mr. Vella?
Through your worship, I can speak to that briefly. There's obviously there's parking in the driveways for the residential. There's parking in the driveways at the back for the live-work, for the people that live above. The lay-by parking on the street is meant for the businesses. People pull into the front of the business and use the business. It's also, from the way the zoning bylaw is written, proposed after hours of businesses for visitor parking at night. So that's something we're looking at. Again, we don't have an example of this in the town, so we'd like to look at some other municipalities and what they do. So I just want to clarify that the business parking is the lay-by parking within the 5-meter widening in this area as proposed.
I think that that's going to be a little hard to control. I mean, the hours of a business, and some could be going till 10 o'clock, some 6 o'clock. So parking is a concern for me in looking at that. And as Ms. Crawford from the audience had said about the visitor parking, I appreciate that those can be visitors. I know in other subdivisions that have condos, Aurora's a perfect example. My son lives in one. There's more than 2 people in some of those townhouses, and one in the driveway and one in the lane, and they're all scrambling for the visitor parking, and there never seems to be enough. So I am just concerned about the congestion there, because I feel it's just a little tight. And then moving on to the parkland, I too have a concern, especially in a subdivision like this when we're looking at medium density. I feel that these are the residents that need green space. They need somewhere to go because there's so many people living in those townhouses and families with a lot of children that we need to make sure that this is not a cash in lieu area to reduce some of that parkland is my concern. On the noise and the railroad tracks for the berming, I have a problem with that in the ward that I have, and for noise and the berming recommendation that I would like, and I don't know whether this is possible with the developers, that they are required to plant trees along that berming. It helps with the noise reduction. It's better for the climate and the environment. And also that if they are berming that and the residents do not have the opportunity to use that berm property going up to there, that if it's wild, we need to clarify to the residents that this is not cut and it's a naturalized area. But I really feel that trees planted in that area would do a lot, and I think we do need to approach Metrolinx pretty soon about the noise for the horns. Thank you.
Councillor Van Berkel.
Thank you, Your Worship. Actually, one of my questions was answered by Mr. Montgomery on the density. I knew the numbers. The other thing, just a comment, because it is in my ward, that this is just the first part of a long procedure before it comes. And this is a public meeting tonight, and we're only receiving this. And I'm sure that before all is said and done, that many changes are going to be made to this, both of these subdivisions. There always is, after all of the public input, the comments are received. So it's not a done deal yet, what you see on paper. The other comment I was going to make, that 10 years ago, or 12 years ago, whatever it was, I was on council, and this was before these subdivisions were there, that Lefroy, the people in Lefroy fought very hard to have the GO station at the 5th line. And that's why this land, this particular developer who owns a lot of land, set this piece of land aside at the time. He also owns the land where the Lefroy station is going, or the GO station is going down. So the people of Lefroy really wanted the GO station there. And in a way, we're very lucky that we're not getting it there, because the density would have been 3 times as high as it is now if the GO station would have gone there, because what's going to go in around the GO station on the 6th line, a lot of people probably haven't seen that yet, but if we were going to get that in Lefroy, my God. So I feel, yeah, the density is high, but it is mid. It's not high density. It's going to make some changes to it. I have the same concerns as Councillor Orsatti and a lot of the people here, parking, snow removal, backyards, that they're small, because some of these backyards, people don't want to put decks in them that big, and there'd be no grass. So there are a lot of concerns, and we're going to have to work with our planning department and with the developer to make these things come right. And I think rather than, you know, helter-skelter development, that at least we're going to have a chance to make this a good development and continue on from where we are now. So I'm happy that we're having this meeting here, and we're going to have more meetings, and we're going to talk to our staff and the developer and try and make this a real good development, and I'm going to make sure of it. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Waters?
Just another element that I'd like just to comment on is I like the live-work visuals that you showed. And the reason I'm pointing out is that I'm going to look at the Director of Planning right now and say this is what we need to have instead of those single level floored commercial buildings along Innisfil Beach Road. It's obviously, it can be done and it should be done. It's a lot better in terms of its visual impact, and it at least brings more people to the downtown core in Alcona. So thank you very much for putting that piece in there.
Any other questions or comments from council? I have a couple. I won't review the ones that have already been talked about. The county commented on garbage, but also police, fire, and paramedic access. Stormwater management. I see the stormwater block there. We have significant flooding downstream of this development. I understand that a development can't add to that, but I'm wondering if there's an opportunity to help downstream issues with over control or whatever it is, oversizing the stormwater management here. And then finally, my question to Mr. Kane would be in regards to where we are in the planning world right now, and this application would be considered under the new rules or the old rules. Bill 108 received royal assent the beginning of June, I believe. So I understand Parkland at some point, instead of being part of the development charges, is going to be part of the new community benefit plan. And I just wondered where we are in that process and whether this would still be DC eligible at this point, or whether we're looking at the new regs under Bill 108 that I don't think are written yet.
Yes, Your Worship. Just to respond to that, yes, the majority of Bill 108 is in force and effect. However, the operational pieces with respect to the development charges in Parkland are not yet out. So, you know, for the moment, we're running, you know, with status quo, and that, you know, that's the basis of Mr. Montgomery's figure of 1 hectare per 300 dwelling units. That may change, and depending on the regulations that come out with it to implement that, you know, there may be a different narrative in that regard when we come back to council with that recommendation report. But at this point, we're moving forward under the rules of the day, which is the current regime with respect to DCs and parkland dedication.
Thank you. Any other final questions? Councillor Payne.
Thank you. Just a quick question that may have been asked while I stepped away. Do these homes and townhouses, are they going to have basements, or are they going to be the slab on grade?
Through your worship to the councillor, they're proposed to be slab on grade.
Councillor Waters.
Since councillor brought that up, slab on grades, are these with frost walls, or are they strictly a slab on just top of the ground?
Through your worship, I can't answer that one. Okay. That's outside my area of expertise, so I'm not. We can get back to you, Councillor Waters, with that. We'll just have to ask our architect and confirm that. I just don't want to give you the wrong information.
Okay, that's fine. The reason I ask is that there's a new form for slab on grade called a raft, which insulates the slab and does less, there's less excavation required. So I just didn't know if the developer realized that. Okay. Thank you.
I see him taking notes, Councillor Waters, so that's a good sign. So if you've not made oral or written submissions in regard to this proposal before a decision is reached, you should be aware that the local planning appeal tribunal, or whatever it's going to be called at that time, may dismiss your appeal. If you wish to be contacted before this application is further considered by council, please fill out the notification form located by the entrance of the council chambers, and council thanks everyone for their participation, and council will now consider the recommendation to receive the report as item 4.3. And again, as Councillor Van Berkel suggested, tonight is about hearing from you and getting questions answered, and it's to receive the information. So can I have a mover and a seconder? Councillor Van Berkel, Councillor Orsatti, all those in favor? Any opposed? That's carried. All right, one more to go, folks. And this one is our final planning public meeting this evening. Concerns a proposed draft plan of subdivision and proposed amendments to the town's official plan and comprehensive zoning bylaw under the Planning Act. The property is municipally known as 1357 Bel Air Beach Road in the town of Innisfil. We'll now hear from the clerk on how the public notice of this meeting was provided.
Your worship, notice of this public meeting was posted on the property and circulated to all agencies and to all landowners within 120 meters of the area affected on August 8th, 2019. Notice was also posted in the Innisfil Journal and on the town's website.
Thank you. I've lost my place. Has any correspondence been received by the clerk's department concerning the proposed amendments?
Yes, your worship. So 3 pieces of correspondence. The first being the County of Simcoe, dated September 16th, providing comments regarding the application. And 2 pieces were received by Dr. Carolyn Allen, both dated September 12th, 2019, expressing concerns about tray horns and impact on homeowners.
Thank you. We'll now hear from Mr. Stephen Montgomery, Senior Planner, who will provide a summary of the planning context of the application.
Thank you. So, Mayor, members of council, staff, and the public, this public meeting is to consider, again, a subdivision zoning and official plan amendment for lands at 1357, which is adjacent, 1357 Bel Air Beach Road. These applications have been submitted to permit a proposed 90-unit residential subdivision on the subject lands. This is a 2018 aerial photo above, which shows the location of the subject lands, which are located inside the settlement area boundary of Lefroy, again, south of Bel Air Beach Road, about 90 meters west of the Metrolinx rail line. They're occupied by a single attached dwelling and attached garage. They're just under 2 hectares with about 120 meters frontage on the south side of Bel Air Beach Road. And the context, again, the Elsemi subdivision to the west, to the south, and to the east is the 1303 Bel Air Beach Road proposal, and then agricultural lands to the north. So the applicant is proposing a 90-unit residential subdivision, including 74 condominium townhouse on a private common element road and 16 condominium live-work units fronting onto Bel Air Beach Road. So the subject lands are designated residential density 2 and neighborhood commercial, or convenience commercial, in the 2006 official plan land use schedule. The official plan amendment, it proposes to redesignate the subject lands from residential density 2 and neighborhood commercial to residential medium density special section. Zoning bylaw amendment proposes to rezone the lands from the current AG, or agricultural general, to a residential townhouse exception RT 25 and 26. And then the studies that have been submitted are being peer reviewed by the Town and Conservation Authority. There was a planning justification report, a placemaking brief, urban design brief. Many of these are the same: functional servicing, hydro-G studies, including bi-monthly monitoring, archaeological study, a noise study, environmental impact, traffic impact, and also in this case, a retail market justification. The retail market justification study was required by the town for the proposed applicant's removal of the neighborhood commercial designation on this property, and I'll speak to that in a minute. So this is their draft concept plan. The applicant's planner will provide more details on. It's 74 units of townhouses on private roads, which are shown, the townhouses are shown in orange. In red at the top are 16 units of live-work townhouses with commercial space on the bottom floor and two-story residential above, fronting onto Bel Air Beach Road. There's a walkway that's shown on the bottom, like a private walkway, basically connecting this condominium to the proposed parkette to the south in 1303 Bel Air Beach Road. And there's a 5-meter, again, road winding with on-street parking and a 3.75-meter trail block, similar to 1303 across the top of the development. I won't go through this too much. It's basically reiterating the same statements of the policies. But again, the Innisfil strategic plan talks about growth and intensification, active transit connecting trails and walkways, infrastructure and provision of affordable housing. Again, this development's inside the Lefroy settlement area, which would reduce sprawl and promote compact development in the community. There's trails supporting active transportation, including an extension of existing planned trail along Bel Air Beach Road. There's private sidewalks and roads through the development. Existing sewer and infrastructure on Bel Air Beach Road would be able to be utilized, and the live-work units would provide options for local businesses. The provincial policy statement, again, talks about density and a compact form, et cetera, similar to 1303, and this would be promoting that. Again, the provincial growth plan also talks about the same things: a compact urban form, residential employment uses, convenient access to local storage services, et cetera, and a diverse range of housing options to accommodate people at all stages of life, accommodation of the needs of different household sizes and incomes. The provincial growth plan, and again, I'll reiterate this a little bit later, but requires a minimum overall townwide average of 32 residents and jobs per hectare, and the latest revision is 40 residents and jobs per hectare, although this is not yet in effect. Other neighborhoods in Lefroy are lower at about 15 units. The density of this site, and again, this is units per net hectare, not persons, is this site alone is 48 units per net hectare, or 125 persons. So when you average this site with 1303 altogether, you get both developments come out to about 94 persons and jobs per hectare. And this compares with the El Semi P1 Lower Mel subdivision, which throughout the whole thing, averaged over the whole thing, is about 50 persons and jobs per hectare. And again, staff are continuing to review these densities in the context of the provincial requirements under the growth plan. I mentioned the Lake Simcoe Protection Plan. Again, it's subject to the settlement area policies. The Conservation Authority is reviewing this site as well. It was circulated to them as well. And lastly, the County of Simcoe official plan. Again, these lands are designated settlement for compact land uses, integration of paths and trails, and a diversity of housing. And staff are also reviewing the application under those policies. So this is the town's Our Place official plan land use schedule, which shows the subject lands outlined in white. They are currently designated, a small portion is residential low density 2, and a large portion is neighborhood commercial. Over 70% of the site is designated neighborhood commercial, which is shown in red, which permits various retail uses, grocery stores, pharmacies, medical offices, restaurants, and other uses. The applicant, as mentioned, submitted a retail market justification report that the town had peer-reviewed by Tate Economic Research. The result of the peer review was that the subject lands are not required to serve retail commercial needs in Lefroy, and that considering the main arterial road is 20th Side Road, a large retail commercial area on Bel Air Beach Road would be challenging to develop, especially in the context of the GO station moving from Bel Air Beach Road to the 6th line. So the peer review study of the town's peer reviewers supported that these lands are appropriate to be redesignated to residential uses. Town planning staff, nevertheless, was concerned about walkability because of the density, as the closest retail component to this property would be a small, proposed about 12,000 square foot to 14,000 square foot future plaza on the 20 Side Road at Lormo Gate, which is here. which is about 600 meters away, and it's relatively small. So live-work units were proposed in a redesign by the applicant to provide a mix of uses that do support some walk-to businesses, including live-work, to establish the principles of complete communities in this section of Lefroy. So the same as 1303 Bel Air Beach Road, the lands are proposed to be redesignated to residential medium density. Residential low density 2 permits single attached townhouses and live work at 13 to 25 units per net hectare. This proposal would be 46 to 48, depending on how you calculate it, but basically 48 units per net hectare. Therefore, the applicant is proposing the residential medium density, which allows a range of 25 to 60, which this density of 48 would fit into. The official plan in section 10.1 states that neighborhoods shall include a range of housing densities and types to promote diversity within settlement areas and accommodate all current and future residents. The proposed unit types combined with the existing adjacent development and existing Lefroy housing stock would provide different housing options. And as mentioned in the previous presentation, I don't have it in this slide in this one, the subject lands are about 1,400 meters from the proposed GO station of the 6th line. And as development approaches the station, in particular in the 800-meter mobility orbit, as it's called, the densities are proposed to increase to the highest densities in the town within that area. So a full review of site hydrogeology is required again with this, implementation of well monitoring, similar to the L7 EP1 subdivision because of wells in the area and the impact on groundwater. Again, draft plan conditions would be the same: architectural control, urban design, phasing, street naming, landscaping, tree preservation, report updates, parkland dedication, etc. Part lot control, again, would be required for the lot division of the live-work units and townhouses, and condo exemption required for condominium, and the development would be entirely subject as well to the site plan control process. The lands are subject to cost sharing, again, so, facilities such as community use lands, parks and local infrastructure, public works, roads, sanitary water and storm water financing and indexing adjustments would all come through that cost sharing, and again, it would be subject to Lefroy cost sharing agreement, which would be a condition of any approvals. With respect to parkland, I mentioned parkland before. There's no parkland in this development, but if you combine 1303 and 1357 together, under 1 hectare per 300 units, the town can ask for 0.81 hectares of parkland, and 0.21 has been provided, and this is all in 1303. So again, we're continuing to review the parkland requirements in the context of the surrounding area, including P1 subdivision, what we can ask for under the Planning Act, the official plan, and the Parks and Recreation Master Plan of the town. Actually, I'll go back one slide. Density and concentration of townhouses, again, is a stated concern of the residents. We're continuing to review the density in context of applicable policies. Development near rail lines and major collector roads do usually contain higher densities than development in the internal areas of a subdivision. Again, we mentioned that the subject lands were adjacent to the original GO station proposal, which would have resulted in a mobility orbit scenario and potentially much higher densities in this area even than what is proposed, or also potential major retail uses that are actually currently permitted on this property based on the designation. So the subject lands are adjacent to townhouses and single-family homes to the west and south. Development should be compatible and provide a variety of housing options in the context of each settlement area while providing compact development and reducing urban sprawl. And again, I'll just mention that within greenfield areas of Lefroy, when you add all the development together in the new areas, development areas, you can have a maximum in the official plan of 25% of townhouses. So we're still reviewing, adding up all the development in the Lefroy greenfield areas to have a look at that policy as well with respect to these new developments. In terms of entrances onto Bel Air Beach Road, only one entrance is provided based on comments from staff to limit the number of entrances and intersections on this major road. Private roads have been designed to discourage through traffic and speeding, and an urban design brief has been submitted and is required to adhere to the Lefroy urban design guidelines. And again, as I said the last time, any official plan amendment on these properties should be site-specific, with specific policies on maximum density and land uses to limit opportunities for major changes or density increases. I mentioned the proposed density is 4 per net hectare, but if it was blanket medium density, it could allow up to 60 and low-rise apartments, and staff want to clearly articulate and nail down the density that's proposed and make it consistent with what the official plan actually says. So the County of Simcoe, if I get this sticking again, the County of Simcoe is the approval authority as mentioned for official plan amendments. So just like 1303, if council did approve this development, including all the planning applications, at a future council meeting, then they would have to go to the County of Simcoe as the final approval authority, because all official plan amendments of the town are required to be approved by the county. Again, in terms of comments, we have residents stating concerns respecting train horn noise and health, and that Bel Air Beach Road crossing should be upgraded. Again, similar, the County of Simcoe provided a letter on September 16th that the design does not comply with their waste collection road design policy. Waste would have to be collected privately unless the development is redesigned to their standards with larger turning radiuses. As well, I mentioned the Simcoe County District School Board in the correspondence submitted this afternoon that they have no objection to this application, but they are reviewing the need for an additional school in this general location to accommodate pressures at nearby schools. So we'll be continuing to speak with the school boards, which were circulated this application, in terms of their stresses and pressures on nearby schools and new school sites. So again, an open house was held at Lefroy Community Center August 28th. Comments are summarized in the staff report, DSR 14119. These include concerns stated of increased crime and social problems and overcrowding and traffic increases for the development. There were concerns about tax increases, again, to pay for the development, and school taxes and school overcrowding. And again, statements that the development should be in Okona and it doesn't reflect the rural character of Lefroy. So in terms of next steps, staff will review and consider all comments, public and council comments and agency comments received on this application, and also peer review comments of the studies. And we will report back to council at a future council meeting recommending whether this development should be approved, and notice would be provided respecting when this report is returning to council to all who wrote, spoke, or signed the guest book for 1303 and 1357 public meetings and open house. And again, the County of Simcoe would have to final approve the official plan amendment if town council decides to adopt the official plan amendment, subdivision, and zoning before they all take effect. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Montgomery. Just before we go to Mr. Sellers, I just had one question, and I don't know if it's allowed, but is there the opportunity to, if anybody signed the book for 1303, to circulate both? And if they only signed for 1357, to circulate both to make sure that they understand when both of them are coming back?
To you, your worship, yes, definitely we can do that. It would make it more efficient to make sure we don't miss anyone.
Thank you. Mr. Sellers, sorry, whenever you're ready.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Cameron Sellers. I'm a planner with Innovative Planning Solutions here on behalf of Laurel View Homes tonight regarding the subject lands at 1357 Bel Air Beach Road. The development proposes a total of 90 residential units, including 74 traditional townhome units and 16 live-work units. So in terms of the design of this site, we've kept the live-work units along Bel Air Beach Road where the most traffic is, consistent with the adjacent development that you just, proposal you just heard of at 1303 Bel Air Beach Road. As you transition to the south of the live-work units, you get into the more traditional townhomes. Central to the site is the access point from Bel Air Beach Road, leading into a looped internal condominium road that fronts all of the traditional townhome units. There's consistent with the adjacent development as well. There's a 5-meter road widening block along Bel Air Beach Road that will be dedicated to the town through these applications, along with a 3.75 meter wide trail block would also be provided to the town, which would link to the trail networks on either side of this development. As you can see on this design here, there are internal sidewalks provided throughout for pedestrian connectivity, as well as parking for the live-work units along Bel Air Beach Road, the lay-by parking that we had discussed earlier, as well as some visitor parking directly on either side of the entrance coming in from Bel Air Beach Road. There's 8 spaces there as well for patrons of the live-work units themselves. visitor parking for the traditional town's internal are spaced throughout the development itself. And this development will provide, or will proceed by way of condominiums. So what that means is private waste collection and snow clearing. This is an artistic rendering, provides a visual of the development as seen from Bellar Beach Road. The live-work units are illustrated here along Bellar Beach Road. You can see the interface, much the same as different architectural styling in this particular rendering, but much the same interface as the adjacent development at 1303. You can see the visual of the visitor parking for the live-work units as soon as you enter the site, and then you can see the looped road throughout fronting the rest of the townhomes. This artistic rendering provides a visual of the development as it relates to the adjacent lands. So unfortunately, the aerial is a little bit dated, but you can see that the adjacent development to the west, the Lormel development, is pretty much fully built out. Adjacent to the west are townhomes, and then proposed adjacent to the south and to the east are also townhomes. So this particular project meshes and is consistent with the surrounding existing and proposed developments as well. And with that, I'll conclude my presentation. Be happy to answer any questions.
Thank you very much. We'll now hear from those who have questions regarding the proposed applications. We'll hear first from the public and then from council, and I would ask that each person addressing council please come forward and use the microphone and state your name. So I think we've got that now. It's the third time we've heard it. Questions or comments from members of the public? Thank you, sir.
Hi, Lou Kinsella again. Just two quick comments. One is Parklands. This development doesn't have any proposal for Parklands. They're adding, I don't know, about 60% of what the other one was proposing, and yet they have to put in a Parkland. So I'm just curious as to why they don't have to. The other thing is, originally, and maybe I'm misunderstanding, but they had talked about doing a traffic study. The traffic study, I'm wondering if right now Bardeau is a cul-de-sac, how did they do a traffic study onto Bardeau from that proposed new development to get a proper idea of what our traffic flow is going to end up being? So I'm just not sure that that was done, and it just, again, it doesn't make sense.
Thank you. Mr. Montgomery, can you address the traffic study?
First of all, I'll talk about the parkland if I could, and then perhaps Scott can speak to the traffic study with the engineering peer review. Parkland is required to be taken for all development, but it can be consolidated in a certain area. So we can borrow from one and put in another location. You can see that, for example, with the Elsemi P1 and P2 subdivisions, where most of the parkland was consolidated. Both were required to provide 5% or 1 hectare per 300 units. Whichever is greater, but it was consolidated into that large central park that's there now on Lorimo Gate Avenue, the 2-hectare park. So this is the same situation. The combined units of 1303 and 1357 produce 0.81 hectare parkland. We'd like to have, if there's parkland in this location, it in kind of a central location, consolidated, with public access to a public road, so the public can use it. So that was the thinking here. There's a couple of parkettes in the Elsemi P1 subdivision that are already there. They're about 0.12 hectares. They're small, and you can't really see it on the screen there, but if you look at the official plan, you can see that the parkettes kind of radiate out from the central park. So you've got a parkette pretty close to 20th Side Road in the P2 subdivision, and then you've got a parkette near, I believe it's near the Storm Pond in the P1 subdivision, and then this would kind of complete those smaller parks radiating out like spokes from the central park. So that's why we thought of putting the park in. But again, all the development has to provide parkland in accordance with the 1 hectare per 300.
Thank you. Mr. McKenzie, did you want to address the traffic study?
Through you, Your Worship, to the public inquiry. I was wondering if you could clarify your question again. Something about Bardeau Street, and it's not. Oh, okay, so you're back at 1303, okay.
Thank you. So I understand the question specific to 1303, but I think if you addressed it in this public meeting as generally how we do traffic studies and how we review them, then I think that might answer the gentleman's question.
Okay, so traffic engineers use a guideline produced by the Institute of Traffic Engineers that they do make assumptions because the road isn't open, right? So there's tables and they make assumptions based on that. And then they put it through a digital model on the computer. And it, based on science and data they collect, they run the numbers and what would go through. And they have arrows and diagrams in the traffic study. But we have commented on some of this data that they've put together. So we're still digging into what they provided for that. So.
Thank you. Any other questions or comments from members of the public?
This has being rezoned from agricultural to residential. No one's brought up that point, and right now that's a big cornfield. So where is our agricultural going to be going?
Thank you very much. Any other questions or comments from the public? Mr. Montgomery, did you want to address that question?
Sure, there's two levels, through your worship, there's two levels of zoning. There's designation and zoning. The zoning is, yes, it's going from agricultural to this. This was a topsoil screening operation, I believe, was here originally, and the other parcel was farmed. But in the official plan, the long-range plan, for quite a period of time, these lands were designated in the official plan and are designated currently for residential purposes rather than agriculture. The agricultural lands are on the north side of Bel Air Beach Road, long-term protected for agricultural purposes in the official plan, which is a 20-year range document. So zoning is more of a historical use on the land, but the official plan, which is the 20-year document projecting into the future, for years has designated these lands residential.
Thank you. Thank you. No, I think the lands that he was referring to was the immediate north of Bel Air Beach Road. The GO train station is designated for the 6th. So any other questions or comments from the public? Questions or comments from council? Councillor Sadi.
Thank you. Just a clarification. This project, is it a standalone street or is it connecting to the other streets in the Lower Mill subdivision? Is this connecting to Bordeaux or is it just a U-loop? That's my first question.
Through your worship. So this particular project will be its own condo corporation, so it does not have connectivity to other municipal streets or other condo roads. It will get very complicated with legal agreements. So this condo corp will take care of these roads, this infrastructure, this snow clearing, this garbage clearing. So I hope that answers your question.
So the back end does not connect to any of the other streets in the subdivision?
That's correct.
Okay, and then just another comment on the parking. So you have sidewalks in here. Is this another reverse lotting that the driveways are on the back of the townhouse units, or is this proposed to be on the front?
Through your worship, that's a good question. So the live work units along Bel Air Beach Road will be reverse frontage with the driveways in the back, and you've got basically your front facade of your units facing Bel Air Beach Road. You do that for a high quality urban design along Bel Air Beach Road. You don't want to see backyards and fences and whatnot, facing the arterial road. Country
Right.
Road.
So just to comment in there, like I recognize the discussion that you had about the sidewalk, which is quite visible in the interior loop. Just I guess a comment to our staff as well, to have consideration, because a problem that we have in other areas is that, I have a nephew living in the Lomas subdivision, so they park his truck cannot fit in the driveway, and it overhangs the sidewalk, and many other residents are doing the same thing, which you can't block a sidewalk, but the driveways aren't long enough to park a vehicle. We're not in the automated little smart cars yet, so it is a problem, and something that I think we should be aware of and try to work with solutions on that.
Thank you, Councillor Fowler.
I'm trying to understand the mentality in regards to the green space, because in the other subdivision we discussed it and we said even without the additional 90 homes, it was inadequate. How are people supposed to actually decompress in this sort of scenario when you're basically having an inadequate green space to begin with and then adding 90 more homes, which can only be walked to very briefly?
Mr. Montgomery?
Again, through your worship, we're looking at the parkland dedication. Again, we'd like to have, one of the things about, when the town takes public parkland, we'd like, obviously, have it publicly accessible rather than a condominium. Sometimes condominium corporations will request additional amenity areas that are private amenity areas. We could look at that in this development. In terms of parkland dedication, this area is under-dedicated at this point, so we're continuing to look at that and try to have substantial amounts of parkland for for the existing public and for these new residents in a central location.
Councillor Waters?
Thank you, Your Worship. One question I didn't ask the last subdivision, but I'll ask on this one here. In terms of affordability, what is the price range do you think these units will be coming in around?
Mr. Sellers?
Through your worship, the exact price point hasn't been, it's premature to establish that at this point. But what I can say is that they'll be among the most affordable units when compared to other built forms and other types of units in Lefroy.
Follow-up question. I just want to know whether or not, considering that we may have small driveways and we're looking at down the road at having smart cities, will there be any, I think they're called electrical charging, is it electrical charging ready in terms of will there be charging sites for cars, electrical cars down the road?
Through your worship, yeah, this development doesn't contemplate that, no.
Any other questions or comments from council? I just had a couple. Mr. Montgomery, the train warning that goes on the deeds of the properties, how deep would that go? Would this property also be required to put something on the deeds regarding the noise?
To you, Your Worship, the site at its closest point, I believe, is about 90 meters from the rail line. Typically, it's a 300-meter area, so I would assume all or most of the site would require that.
Thank you. And what controls could we put in place to make sure that the live-work units stay live-work and that the bottom floor doesn't become residential?
We'll have to look into that as best practices from other municipalities. I'd be curious to see how that occurs through the zoning regulations or other forms of regulation. We can certainly report back in the report on that.
Thank you. So if you have not made oral or written submissions in regard to this proposal before a decision is reached, you should be aware that the local planning appeal tribunal may dismiss your appeal. However, there is still time to make oral or written submissions if something else comes to mind. And how would we deal with those, Mr. Montgomery? Should they be sent to the clerk's office?
I'm sorry, I didn't, additional correspondence on this file after the public meeting?
So yeah, if people after this public meeting, what's the time window for any further comments that people might want to submit?
The time window for further comments, comments can be submitted up until the recommendation report. The recommendation report will return to council at a future date. We haven't set it yet. We have to sit down and review, have more meetings with the developer and review the comments. Once the report comes back, submissions can be made up until the time of the decision of that report.
Thank you. And then if you wish to be contacted when this application is to be considered and see that report, you can fill in the notification form located by the entrance to the council chambers. And council wishes to thank everyone for their participation and will now consider a recommendation to receive the report under item 4.4. So we need a recommendation to receive Councillor Van Berkel and Councillor Payne. All those in favor? That's carried. Now the confirming bylaw, could I have a mover and a seconder? Councillor Fowler, Councillor Ices, all those in favor? That's carried. An adjournment, Councillor Nicol, Councillor Payne, all those in favor? That's carried. Thank you, everybody, for your attention and for being here. Much appreciated. Thank you.